Here is hard truth most people don't like to hear. Grid SCADA failure rarely come from bad commissioning. They come from designs that was insufficient from the start. Hi, my name is Jordan Zhao, MD of Australian Control Engineering, ACE. Projects don't lose weeks at FAT or SAT because of teams don't work hard enough. In fact, teams usually work really hard on site. They lose time because of the SCADA and comms architecture was never aligned with AEMO and the TNSPs in the first place. That's why we use ACEems CONNECT, our 7-step method that helps solar farms, wind farms, and the BESS deliver smooth compliance grid SCADA connections. There are 7 steps. Today, I'll walk you through the second steps, which is represented by O, Optimise Design, the step that prevents the expensive surprises later. They are the sub-steps that combine to complete step 2, which is Optimize. Start with the grid rules. There's no such thing about standard SCADA design for grid connections. Every state and every TNSPs does things slightly differently, and differences matter. So we always begin with grid obligations, AEMO requirements, plus your TNSP's special standard. For example, DNP3 over serial in some regions versus Ethernet TCP in others. Requirements for dual communication links. Requirements for redundant RTUs or redundant servers. Sometimes both links and hardware redundancies with I/O redundancies, depending on the specific requirement. We then look at the performance expectations. End-to-end event response times, event buffering storage during the communication outage, expected failover times, and recovery behavior. Dispatch commands behavior, including priorities, interlocks, confirmations. We don't guess what the grid wants. We designed to meet it exactly. Second, match the design to real operations. Here is what many teams forget. Passing compliance is not the finish line. Operating the plant reliably for 20 years is. So after the grid rules, we look at the day-to-day operational needs. We ask who will operate the plants and from where. What visibility is needed during the dispatch? What alarms must be seen immediately? How will remote troubleshooting be handled? What maintenance access is required and what must remain locked down? Then we build an architecture that fits grid compliance, real-world operations, project schedules, budget, and if redundancy is required, we only specify hardware that's actually supported, not hardware that almost does. Vendor brochures on proof. Not every RTU, gateway PLCs, or SCADA platforms support every redundancy mode, and you won't find the limitations in the marketing material. Common problems show up too late. FAT failovers that don't behave correctly. SAT dispatch commands that misbehave after a comms dropout. Real-world outage exposed hidden firmware behaviors. By then, delays and costs are locked in. To mitigate that risk, ACE runs in-house type testing on the SCADA hardware we use. We test real behaviors across real scenarios, link failover and recovery under traffic, event buffering and replay, DNP responsiveness under degraded comms, hardware switchover behaviors, I/O redundancy supports where required. Firmware quirks that only appears under load. In one test, we discovered that an RTU did not support hardware I/O redundancy, and the vendor only confirms it after seeing our evidence. Here is the upside. You don't need to learn these lessons the hard way. ACE has built a tested database of RTUs, gateways, PLCs, and SCADA platforms that we've already validated in-house. So when we designed your system with the proposed hardware and the software, we've chosen knowing, proven combinations that worked in the field, under grid standards, under redundancy conditions, under real operational load. This lets us balance compliance, performance, redundancy, budget, and schedule. Outcome for you: lower risks, fewer surprises, less rework, a smooth path to registration and energization. That's all Optimise Design. If you are developing a solar farm, wind farm, or BESS, engage ACE early, because the cheapest SCADA is the one you don't have to fix later. We'll make sure your SCADA and comms design meets AEMO and TNSP standard from day one. Support your operational goals and keep your project on track.